Hi everyone, it's Jeremy with Humble Organics, and today I'm excited to share with you some tips on growing tomatoes in containers. So if your family's like my family, we absolutely love homegrown tomatoes in the summer, and we can't get enough of them. We have a whole raised garden bed dedicated to growing tomatoes, but that's still not enough. And so to squeeze in a few extra plants, we also grow plants in containers. So this is a really good way if you have limited garden space, or if you have no space for an in-ground garden, you can still grow tomatoes by using containers. So the first thing you want to think about is what type of tomato to grow. So in containers, things like cherry tomatoes typically work quite well. But the problem with any kind of indeterminate tomato, and indeterminate tomatoes typically have superior flavor compared to determinates, which are going to be smaller size plants. The problem with indeterminates is that they can get really unruly. And so this year, I am super excited to be trying several dwarf varieties of tomatoes. And so these are tomatoes that have been bred by the Dwarf Tomato Project. And the Dwarf Tomato Project is a conglomeration of tomato aficionados that are spread around the world. And the goal of the project is to create a plant with heirloom quality fruit, but that is also small and compact and can easily be grown in containers or in your garden for that matter. And so these plants grow, most of them to 4 feet or less, no more than say 5 feet. And so they're much easier to manage in a container. And the great thing is they've been bred specifically for flavor. They're open pollinated, which means you can save seeds from your tomatoes. And so purchase them once, grow them, and you can save the seeds and plant them again the next year. So we're really excited to give these a try this year, and we'll be kind of chronicling our success with them throughout the season. Okay, so when you're growing in containers, and this goes for anything you might want to grow in a container, any sort of vegetable crop, the most important thing is what type of container. And so here you can see we are using these fabric grow bags, which have a number of advantages. The main advantage is that they allow for better root development because plants don't become pot bound when they grow in these fabric bags, meaning that the roots don't circle around when they reach the edge of the pot when they're in fabric bags. They also moderate temperature quite well. So, it can get really hot in a container or cold for that matter, and these fabric bags are breathable, and so they're going to manage temperature a little bit better. Size-wise, you want to go with probably at least 20 gallons for a tomato. Even up to 25 would probably be better. You want to give the plants a lot of room to grow and develop a strong root system. So the other nice thing about these grow bags is you can actually get away with starting your plants a little bit earlier. Tomatoes are very susceptible to frost. If they experience frost, they're goners. So you want to make sure you avoid that. The nice thing about growing in a grow bag is if you plant your tomatoes out a little bit early and you get caught out on that late frost, you can actually just carry these into your garage or inside your house for a night or two, and they'll be just fine. They're heavy, but you can do it. We like to use these fabric bags, but you can use pots as well. Just make sure they're large enough. Okay, so to plant in one of these containers, the second thing you want to consider is what type of soil or potting mix you want to use. So first of all, do not use garden soil in a container. Okay, your garden soil is great in your garden, and it might be the best soil there. It's not going to work very well in a container. You want to use a potting mix because potting mixes are specifically designed to have enough drainage, right, which is really important. So you want to get specifically a potting mix, and it's best to get one that says it's for outdoor use. Now, that's one way that this can get kind of expensive. If you're growing a lot of container veggies, you can pay a lot actually for potting mix. And so we're actually reusing potting mix from last season to save a little bit of money. And that's fine to do as long as you replenish the nutrients in the soil. So what happens is over the course of a season, you know, the nutrients get taken up by the plant, or they get washed out with all the watering that you do throughout the season. And so you need to add a good amount of organic fertilizer to the soil mix to kind of revive it. So we just use a granular organic fertilizer. We add a good dose of that. It should tell you recommended amounts on your package, and we replenish the soil in that way, and then we also add a little bit of compost as well. You want to first, before you put your plant in, you want to water it, because like here, you know, the soil really dried out. Here we've had kind of a dry spell, and so you want to make sure that it tends to clump a lot when it gets dry, and it's really hard to rehydrate potting mix when it gets totally dry. So spend some time getting it wet before you put your plant in. Okay, so let's go ahead and plant. And so to plant tomatoes in containers is pretty much like planting them in the ground. A couple important steps are that you want to bury the stem deeply in the soil. And the reason for that is that all of these little hairs on the stem will develop into roots, and you'll get a much healthier, stronger root system if you bury tomatoes deeply. So these dwarf tomatoes are pretty small. They've been growing for several weeks, so by comparison, my normal varieties are about this tall by now. So there's not a whole lot of stem to bury here, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and just pinch off the lowest branches, and you can go all the way up to the last, you know, just leave the very top branch and then bury it up to that point. So let's go ahead and zoom in here so you can see what I'm doing, how I'm going to bury this stem. Okay, so let's take a look at the stem here. So again, you can see, I don't know if you can see all these little hairs here, but we're going to bury this stem all the way up to here instead of at the level it was buried in the pot. So I'm just going to cradle the stem between my fingers, flip this upside down, and it pops right out. Dig yourself a good deep hole. And again, I'm going to go deep so that we're all the way burying that stem. Okay, so that's going to help this plant develop a really nice, strong root system. All right, so next step, you got your plant in the pot. One thing you're going to find out when you grow in containers is that you do have to water a lot, okay? You need to water and you need to fertilize a lot. Watering, one way that we can kind of help minimize that as much as possible is to mulch, okay? So if you guys follow Humble Organics, you know we're big advocates of mulching in your garden. We always use straw, but you can use any sort of organic material. And what that's going to do is not only moderate temperatures, but most importantly, keep the soil moist for longer. And so when it gets really hot in a container, these containers dry out pretty quick. So you're still probably going to have to water them possibly once a day, even if it's not raining. But having that thick layer, you know, 2-3 inches deep, and we'll add more as this plant gets taller, will really help with that as we go throughout the season. Because you water so much in containers, that also means that you're going to have to fertilize more than you would if you have really rich garden soil. Because what happens is when you water, the nutrients just tend to run out with the water. They tend to run out of the container. So with tomatoes, we fertilize every week with a fish emulsion, which is just an organic liquid fertilizer, sort of all-purpose fertilizer. In addition to the fertilizer that we put in the soil, this kind of slow release granular fertilizer. And that should keep it going, but you want to constantly monitor your plants, make sure they don't look nutrient stressed. And if they do, just give them another dose of fertilizer. So once you get the mulch down, you want to give it a good dose of water. and that's going to help keep the mulch down, and also obviously the plant's going to need some water. It's during this period of transplant, it's going to be a little bit shocked, so any kind of pampering you're going to do, this is the time to do it. So that's pretty much it. That's all you need for planting tomatoes. We hope you'll give this a try, and definitely we'll keep you posted on how our dwarf tomato varieties are doing throughout the season. So happy gardening.